Hello and good afternoon, everyone. We will just give a couple of extra minutes for folks to join today's session, and we will get started momentarily. Thank you for your patience. Give everyone just another minute or so. All right, so it is now 2 minutes past the hour. So let's go ahead and get started. Thank you everyone for attending today's session. We are mTrust HR, and so my name is Philip Santos. I'm joined by my colleague Jessica Day. We will be reviewing today's topics with you all, including updates to policies surrounding the Form I-9, some changes in, audit enforcement, and how employers can prepare for audits, as well as some additional details on recent updates that are coming through that would affect employers as part of the I-9 and E-Verify process. Before we get started, my colleague Jess has kindly requested that any questions you may have, please use GoToWebinar's chat or questions feature, where if you use the Q&A tab, you can type in your questions and we will make sure to respond as part of today's discussion. Also, as a disclaimer, this webinar is purely for informational purposes and should not be construed as legal advice. And so with that being said, let's take a look at the agenda for today. Again, we'll be discussing a number of topics with you all. This will include updates to audit enforcement and some recent policy changes that ICE has implemented, which you'll see. We'll also take a look at recent news regarding temporary protected status. You may have heard of some of the recent rulings, and so we'll take a look at what the current guidance is and what that looks like for employers. We'll also discuss some of the upcoming changes for employers that participate in E-Verify, specifically with the new version of E-Verify that the Department of Homeland Security is going to be releasing in the very near future. And lastly, we'll discuss some of the features that the mTrust platform provides to employers for supporting compliance around completion of the electronic Form I-9, completion of E-Verify, support for audits, and some tools that we provide as a software company to assist employers in maintaining compliance. So, Jess, would you like to speak a little bit on what news surrounding, enforcement of I-9 audits has recently come to light?
Absolutely. Thanks, Philip. So if you guys have been following the news, you've seen that there have been a lot of changes for the I-9. Specifically, they are changing how they are enforcing the regulations. So they have kind of redefined some of the errors that you might potentially see on an I-9. So previously, there were technical violations, there were substantive violations. If these were found during an audit, you would have a 10-day, they called it a cure time, to correct any technical violations. So those were things that were considered to be temporary. You would be able to go back, edit that I-9, after that audit, and then present those corrected I-9s and not be penalized for them. They have changed the designation of some of the violations, though. USCIS is now considering several things to be technical violations that were not previously violations. So there is a field on the I-9 for other last names used. Maybe a previous name, name was changed legally, maiden name, along those lines. If there is a previous name that that person has used, but it is not captured on that I-9, that can now be considered a technical violation. Failure to record an employee's updated name in Supplement B. So Supplement B is that section where, if you need to update anything on that I-9, so specifically in this case, a name change, you do need to go back to that I-9, fill out that Supplement B with that updated employee name to ensure that the I-9 is current at all times. For paper I-9 specifically, so if you guys utilize paper I-9s and not a digital I-9 system, there is a requirement for the employee's full name to be at the top of page 2, Supplement A or Supplement B, as those, if they are included. If your papers do get separated, there is a requirement for the employee name to be on all of the forms making up that I-9. Also, for anyone participating in E-Verify, you do need to ensure that that social security number is correct. So that could be considered a technical violation. Also, not using the correct version of the I-9 at the time of completion. So the government does update that I-9, typically maybe every year, every other year. It does vary, but you do need to ensure that you are using the version that is current at the time of the employee's hire. So that is also something that you could be considered in violation of if you're maybe using an expired version. There have also been several violations that used to be technical violations, meaning that if it was caught during an audit, you would have time to adjust that and come back with the corrected I-9. There is a pretty extensive list of violations that no longer fall under that category. They are now considered substantive violations. So if the, excuse me, if the I-9 does have these violations at the time of an audit, you will not have that 10-day cure time to make those corrections any longer. So there is a much greater chance of being dinged for those and incurring a fine or a penalty for those violations. So specifically in section 1, we've kind of broken these down for you. If you are missing that employee date of birth in section 1, that is now a substantive violation. It used to be technical. Missing, if applicable, that USCIS or A number for a lawful permanent resident. Missing the date next to the signature, used to be a technical violation, that is now substantive. If you are completing and retaining a Spanish language form I-9 outside of Puerto Rico, that is where the I-9 is able to be retained in Spanish. It does need to be retained in English for the rest of the United States. If you are missing that employee signature in section 1, or if you are missing the expiration date of a work authorization document for an alien authorized to work. These are all now substantive violations. So, you don't have that option to correct those after the audit has been incurred any longer. In Section 2, now the name or title of the employer representative, so whoever is completing Section 2, verifying those documents and signing that, if the name or title of that person is not entered, that is now a substantive violation. If you do not have the employee's first day of employment, so, again, that I-9, Section 1 needs to be filled out by the employee's first day of work for pay. Section 2 does need to be completed within 3 days of that first start date. So if you fail to record that date of employment, very important, that needs to be on here. It's now a substantive violation. If you are missing any of the document information up here, so, document title, issuing authority, document number if applicable, and expiration date if applicable. If any of that data is missing, that is now substantive. If you do not include today's date, the date of the signature in Section 2. And also this little box here, if you are using the alternative procedure, which is the term that USCIS uses for video verification, so remotely verifying your employees' documents over, Teams, Zoom, FaceTime. This is an acceptable method of documentation or of verification per USCIS, but it does have to be noted here. So you do need to make sure that this box is checked off if you are utilizing that remote verification. As a reminder, remote verification is only available if you are participating in E-Verify. So for any E-Verify users, you can use that remote verification for those documents. This checkbox does need to be marked off here to indicate that that was the method that was used. So on the rest of the I-9, if your employee did require a preparer or translator to help them fill out that Section 1, per the government, Section 1 is only supposed to be filled out by the employee. So if they do require any assistance with that, the information of that person assisting them does need to be collected in Supplement A and kept with that I-9. If they are a rehire, your I-9 is good for 3 years. If your employee leaves the company and does come back within that 3-year mark, they are able to use the same I-9. You would just fill out that Supplement B and enter their rehire information. Any pertinent changes that have happened since then. This is also where you're going to be updating any last name or first name as needed, as we talked about earlier. So Supplement B, also where you're updating any name changes. If you are using an electronic I-9 system, like the one that EmpTrust provides, the e-signature and security documentation needs to be airtight. So there needs to be an audit trail. You will potentially need to be able to provide the system, security documentation for an audit in the case of, your records being requested. So that would also be considered a substantive violation if you do not have that information available for an audit. So to kind of boil it down, those errors that we just looked at, previously they were considered technical errors. You would have had 10 days after the start of an audit to correct them and then provide the corrected I-9s to the auditors. So now that's not the case. Those will all result in immediate substantive errors, and you might incur penalties. The fees have been increased, so they are now higher than they were in previous years. The one single error could incur anywhere from $288 to $2,861, depending on the error and the severity. And that is per error. So if you have multiple I-9s that do have errors on them, that does add up. This is just a chart here. I do have the slides available in the materials section, so these will be available to you guys if you want to refer back to later. But these are the new amounts of the fines. As I said, it depends upon the violation itself, how much there would be charged, but this is the fee that is per violation. So again, if you have multiple violations on one I-9 or multiple I-9s with violations, that can add up very, very quickly. So you want to make sure that your I-9s are absolutely in tip-top shape in the event of an audit. And then I do want to see how many people have been paying attention here. So we have a poll here. It should pop up on your screens there. So the question is, true or false? Employers have 10 days after an audit to correct a missing signature date in Section 1. So we're talking about that signature date, Section 1. Do you still have those 10 days after an audit to correct that? I'll give it maybe another couple seconds, let people get their answers in. Okay. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and end the poll. And we've got 32% are saying that this is true. Employers do have that 10 days after an audit to correct a missing signature date in Section 1. 68% have said that is false. So that's correct. This is now false. With the regulations as they were before, you did have that 10 days. In the past couple of months, the government has changed that. So you no longer have those 10 days after the audit to correct it. So good, great job. We're gonna get you guys some more information here in just a moment. So let me close this poll. And then Philip, would you mind taking us through some of the TPS changes that we've seen?
Yeah, absolutely. So there have been some, updates to temporary protected status, especially for those of you that have been, keeping up with the news. Most recently, the Supreme Court had ruled on a particular case, which did impact, the temporary protected status for specific individuals. So just taking a look here, there were some countries which had temporary protected status ended as of earlier this year. That includes Honduras, Nepal, and Nicaragua. That was back in February of this year. And as I've shared most recently, with the ruling from the Supreme Court allowed the administration to proceed with terminating temporary protected status for Haitian and Syrian immigrants. And as of last week, or the past week or so, I should say, the USCIS has provided some additional guidance to employers on how they should, look to complete the Form I-9 for individuals that fall under TPS for these different countries. And so specifically for the list that you see here, under extended per court order, that includes Haiti, Burma, Myanmar, Ethiopia, South Sudan, Yemen, and Syria. These, per the guidance from the USCIS, have, they've shared to employers that as you complete the Form I-9, if you're completing it on paper, you're going to want to ensure that Section 1, where the hire typically provides their work until date, should be completed using quote unquote as per court order. And separately, when you complete Section 2, you want to make sure that the date entered into Section 2 is listed as July 10th, 2026. And that is the most recent guidance from the USCIS. It is available on the USCIS website, and we do encourage you to use that as a resource if you are not aware. They will typically update based on court rulings or policy changes, shifts in temporary protected status, they have reference material that you can review for each of these countries and understand, um, whether TPS has been extended, what date it has been extended until, how should employers look to complete Section 2. And so it is a great resource. Now, if you do use an electronic Form I-9 system, and most importantly, a compliant electronic I-9 system, it is common where vendors will help you complete Section 2 to the latest guidance, and that does include our platform as well. And so just understand, for those of you that may hire, population that would be considered under TPS, this is the latest guidance that has just been released by the USCIS over the course of the past week or so for these specific countries. There have been some additional changes as well to other countries. We see Lebanon was extended until November 27th of this year. And then Venezuela has a population of individuals, depending on when they were authorized and the expiration date listed on their EAD card. They are eligible to remain authorized until October 2nd of 2026. Again, this is all documented on the USCIS website under, if you just Google search USCIS temporary protected status, you will find that reference material. We've also included it into these slides, which you will receive a copy of as well. So we're going to shift gears here, and we're going to now take a look at what changes are up and coming for specifically E-Verify employers. Now, E-Verify, if you're aware, is an electronic system provided by the federal government. It's a partnership between the Department of Homeland Security and the Social Security Administration. And it's a system that provides employers the ability to verify the employment eligibility of their new hires as part of the Form I-9 and E-Verify process. And with that, the government frequently updates their electronic system. And the current version that the government is on is version 31. And most recently, the DHS has announced that they will be updating E-Verify to version 32. And there are some enhancements and some changes with this new version that they are introducing. And so we see that listed here. Some of these updates will impact authorized web services providers, which are third-party vendors, including mTrust, as well as other vendors that provide employers the ability to submit cases to E-Verify through the electronic system. And some of these changes are, affecting E-Verify overall, whether it's through a web services provider or for employers that may log in directly on the government website. So these changes include documentation that is now fully web-based for developers that are looking to integrate with E-Verify. So again, for these third-party vendors that are authorized web services providers for E-Verify can now access the necessary technical documentation surrounding version 32 directly online. Historically, the DHS has provided this documentation as a PDF. available on their website for those that have developer access. And now they have shifted to a fully online web-based documentation as they're, moving to modernize the platform and introduce some of these features. Now, another welcome update for those systems that integrate with E-Verify is that this new version will allow these systems to automate enrollment to E-Verify directly via the APIs and endpoints that this new version provides. So for systems such as mTrust, if you choose to participate, it means you can directly enroll through the platform itself and use that to set yourself up, and participate in E-Verify. So that's a nice welcome change that the Department of Homeland Security has introduced. Now, as it pertains to employers and, specifically changes to the E-Verify, let's say, case creation submission process itself, there are some new fields that the DHS has introduced as part of case creation and submission. And so what the DHS will now require when a case is being created and submitted is some additional information, right? In addition to the Form I-9 information, where typically when you're creating and submitting a case, you will enter in the Section 1 information. If you're logging on directly on the government website, you enter in the Section 1 information that's needed, Section 2 document information that's needed, and you use that to create and submit the case. If you're using an electronic I-9 system, typically the system will submit that for you based on what's been completed onto the electronic Form I-9. So with version 32, some of the new fields that they will now require for case submission will include the hiring site location itself for that particular new hire, right, or employee. And so that is a new requirement that the DHS has introduced for submitting cases to E-Verify. If the case is being submitted from an external third-party vendor, the DHS now requires the the name of that vendor or software provider to be present in the request of the case that is submitted as well. There are some additional fields that they have introduced. So if this is a remote hire, they'll look to have that indicated when the case is created and submitted. If you've used the alternative procedure for verifying the employment identification and eligibility documents, that is expected to be included now as part of case creations. For individuals that are on, let's say, an automatic extension, let's say someone on an EAD card or Form I-766 on an extension, and specifically what type of extension, the DHS is now requesting that that information is included when a case is created and submitted through, these web services systems. And so a majority of these changes will be handled by your vendor, right? If you're using a system, and certainly at mTrust, we are going to be working to complete the work required for the eventual cutover date, which you see here is in 2027. to ensure that, the system is submitting this information as expected. If you are using the E-Verify website itself, you will typically see some of these requirements pop up as you're getting ready to, again, create and submit that case based on the information you're providing. Certainly, the system will prompt you for those details. So some really interesting changes with this new version. And, at a high level, it's really, if you're using an electronic system such as mTrust, majority of these changes will not really impact your process. However, just to make you aware, the DHS is requiring some of these new fields to be included when these cases are created and submitted. And so, uh, our teams will be working on having that updated for the eventual cutover date, which is set by the Department of Homeland Security. And now, speaking of remote hires, as that was one of the fields that the DHS introduced, we're happy to announce that as mTrust, we are now offering a new service to support employers for I-9 verifications. So we are introducing what's called the EVA verification option, or employee verification agents, where for those employers that are utilizing our platform for their electronic I-9s, the hire can complete and submit Section 1 fully electronically for you. And that includes, completing the form itself. The system certainly validates the information, ensures there's no technical errors or validations, or violations, I should say. And, the hire will upload their choice of supporting documents from the list of acceptable documents. And once that's submitted, the hire is able to self-schedule a verification appointment with one of our trained representatives. And so using the system, it's very simple and straightforward for hires to complete what is expected of them in terms of Section 1 of the Form I-9, and then also schedule their own verification appointment, which will be virtual with one of our trained representatives. So they will pick a day and time that works for them within the guidelines of completion of the form itself, and they will receive confirmations, communications on that upcoming virtual meeting. And our representative during that virtual call will meet with the hire. They will inspect the documents with the hire through, let's say, Microsoft Teams. And that representative will complete Section 2 on behalf of your organization. So this is a really nice feature. The I-9 process can sometimes, for some employers, feel, administratively overwhelming, or it takes time. And so to assist employers and to help you offload some of that, we are introducing this new feature, which we are excited to announce, to support employers in that sense and help you complete Section 2. And with your access to the environment, you will have visibility into what I-9s have been completed. Has my hire self-scheduled their appointment? When is it going to be? Have they completed Section 2? And the additional details around that. So certainly with your own access, you can fully monitor, track that progress, and have access to that documentation that's been completed. So very excited to introduce this new feature. All right, and we also wanted to share that as a software company, we're always working to introduce, new features into the system, enhance the system further. One of our focuses as a software company is helping organizations maintain compliance. And so we're always looking at what we can do to make specifically, as part of today's discussion, the Form I-9 process easier for folks to complete, both in terms of the hires perspective, as well as from the Section 2 perspective, et cetera. And so we have introduced, some additional tools, and the system fully validates the form that is completed, ensuring that, sections, whether it's Section 1, Section 2, Supplement B even, for example, previously referred to as Section 3, the system ensures that those sections are completed without technical errors, right, or technical violations. Lots of logic and checks the system performs to ensure that that is the case. There's also guidance built into the system, and as we discussed earlier, around temporary protected status, or even other scenarios that employers may oftentimes encounter in the course of completing I-9 verifications. The system is built with guidance and support so that it adheres to the most recent policy changes or guidelines that have been introduced as part of this overall process. And so there's a lot of great features that are built into the system, again, to support employers overall and make sure that I-9s are completed to the guidelines and in a compliant fashion. There's also additional add-on features available that employers can choose to utilize within the system, and that includes, some intelligent document parsing or scanning technologies to help to further mitigate any potential, let's say, discrepancies or items that might exist in the course of the I-9 completion process. And so really great features that have been built, and certainly we will continue to build as we maintain the platform and ensure it's up to date with the current landscape, the policy changes, the guidelines that have been introduced as part of that process. So Jess, would you like to speak a little bit about the system support for audits?
Absolutely. So we here at mTrust, we take compliance very seriously, especially with the increase in ICE audits that we've been seeing across the country. We do have set packages available if you do receive a notice of inspection. So for any current clients, this is something we can assist with. Typically, when you receive that NOI, you will usually have 3 days to produce the information that they're looking for. So it's important, for mTrust clients, let us know immediately. For anyone else, if you do use a third-party vendor, let your vendor know right away so they can ensure that they are able to get that documentation in order for you, make sure that it is all present, it's all correct, and in the right format. So here at mTrust, we do provide a dedicated team to help you with that audit. So we're with you every step of the way. If they do require specific information, we're able to help you sort through that. We can provide any demos that they might ask for. As part of an audit, they may ask to see system documentation, how the system works. They might ask for a demo, something we can absolutely accommodate if necessary, not a problem. So, we're able to help you with extracting any data, your I-9s that they might need, supporting documents such as that audit log, the actual documents of the employee that need to be verified. If you do have those on file, you're able to retrieve those. If you're using E-Verify, they might want a copy of that E-Verify case history. Any changes that have been made to that I-9, they're going to want to see that. And they will need everything typically indexed for them. So at mTrust, that's something that we assist with. Like I said, if you do use another third-party vendor, they should hopefully be able to help you out with that and kind of walk you through and make sure that it's in the right format, everything's correct for you. So like I had mentioned, they might ask for a demo, they might ask for tech documents on the system that you're using. So that's something we can absolutely provide. For other third-party vendors, they should also be able to provide these. This is a requirement. So if you're using another system, I would definitely ask them this now, so that if you do, in the case of an audit, you don't want to find out at that point that they don't have this in place already. So always double check, check with your vendors. Like I said, here at mTrust, we do have a compliance kit that we provide. We do those demonstrations, and we do have that full support that we offer your company. Do also want to mention, if you do have a legal department or counsel that you use, let your legal counsel know immediately as well. So when you receive that notice of inspection, notify your I-9 vendor and notify your legal department or your legal counsel right away. Philip, would you mind giving us a couple more tips on preparing for audits?
Yeah, happy to do so. Really, time is to your advantage. If you certainly have the ability to prepare early for ICE audits moving forwards, you want to make sure to leverage that time that you may have, to ensure that you are audit ready, to respond to a potential notice of inspection in the future. So to do so, you want to ensure that you have completed I-9s for all employees, and we'll talk about some of the requirements there in some of the upcoming slides. You want to ensure that your work authorization dates for those employees that are on temporary work authorizations are current in the system, right? Whether you're managing that, again, on paper or through a system such as mTrust, you want to make sure that those work authorization dates are up to date and current as part of that process. For E-Verify employers, the DHS monitors your cases for compliance, and so you want to ensure that you complete and close all E-Verify cases that have been submitted. And so typically employment authorized cases close for you automatically. Any other case that may require some additional information, this is going to be, let's say, your photo matches or tentative non-confirmations, and some other potential case results. You want to make sure that you see those cases through to the end and make sure that those cases are closed within the system, right? Very important to ensure that you're maintaining compliance in that sense by keeping those cases, up to date and closed as part of that process. Now, internally, whether you're using a system or again potentially on paper, you want to review your I-9s and identify I-9s that may have any errors, any violations, and take action to correct those if you are able to do so, as needed as part of that process. For your existing employees, we talked about you want to ensure that you have completed I-9s for those individuals. You also want to ensure that you have those records updated with the termination dates for potentially terminated individuals, right? Or individuals that have been terminated, um, as part of that process. And so this is important to ensure that you are following the retention criteria for the Form I-9. This is typically referred to as the 3+1 rule, where employers are expected to retain I-9s for 3 years after the individual's hire date or 1 year after the individual's termination date, whichever is later. And so you want to make sure that your records are up to date. You have completed I-9s on file for all employees, and you also have those records up to date with termination information. And from there, you want to ensure that you purge any records that have passed the retention criteria. So you want to make sure you're only retaining I-9s that you're required to through the regulatory requirements. Also, critically important is ensuring that you have a SOP documented, right? So you want to have your standard operating procedures documented as a company, right? How are I-9s completed and what does that look like? Who's responsible? How do we you know, get assistance if needed, right? If you're using a system such as mTrust, you want to have that documented internally, and it helps the process overall, helps you with training, and helps you to pass on that knowledge in the future. Now, um, uh, as you're preparing for an audit, you want to also take a look at your current process as we move to the next slide. And you want to take a look at your existing I-9s, right, and your internal inventory, right? So we talked about ensuring that you have completed I-9s for your employees. This is for anyone that has been hired after November 6th of 1986 to ensure you're compliant with the regulatory requirements. We discussed the 3+1 rule. Now, if you have any incomplete I-9s or you identify any I-9s that were not fully completed, you want to ensure that you complete those as soon as possible, and make sure that is completed and part of your records. Now, if you identify in the course of your review some I-9s that may have a significant number of errors or potentially some I-9s that have entire sections blank, right? Maybe section 1 and 2 are completely blank. Essentially, the I-9 was never completed. So historically, the USCIS has recommended that for I-9s that have a significant number of errors, the employer does have the option to have that employee complete a new I-9 and then kind of, document that as part of the completion process, again, making sure that you have it as part of your records. So critically important. Again, the intention is to leverage your time. And we know time is valuable, but you do want to make sure to prepare early and leverage these practices to ensure that you are audit ready. Again, emphasizing the fact of creating an SOP. We talked about how it's useful for training colleagues that you may bring onto your team, also helpful for transferring that knowledge, right? As you may depart the company, you may move on to a different role. It helps the organization overall ensure kind of a smooth transition process, and ensuring that the organization is prepared for any potential audit in the future. As Jess had also shared, you do also want to make sure to consult with legal counsel on recommended practices, or especially if you are issued a notice of inspection, you want to contact and consult your counsel on kind of the next steps and what that process should look like. Jess, do you want to maybe take a look at or talk about some additional recommendations?
Yeah, absolutely. So one thing to remember, you definitely need to make sure that you are being consistent with the documentation for all of your employees. You don't want there to potentially, during an audit, come back and have it look like maybe there was any discrimination going on. So you want to make sure that all of the employees are given these same options. You want to make sure that they do have the option to decide what documents they want to use for their I-9, as long as it falls into the parameters of a valid List A document or that combo of a B and a C document. You want to make sure that all of your documents are being purged per the same rules. So you don't want to maybe hang on to someone's I-9 for a little bit longer than you would for another person in the same situation. So important to make sure that there is just consistency across all employees. You definitely don't want to over document. So you want to keep the minimum required documents that you need for that I-9. If your employee gives you, say, a passport and their driver's license and their birth certificate and their social security card, you don't want to hang on to all of that with their I-9. You just want to keep and provide during an audit the minimum documentation. At mTrust, we ensure that, the I-9s are not being over documented. That would not look great for you in an audit if there is just so much documentation, over what is required for the I-9. So, mTrust can absolutely help with that. Any compliant digital I-9 systems can contain field-specific logic to help prevent those errors. Philip touched on the fact that, mTrust does help to regulate the document formatting, ensuring that things are entered where they're supposed to be, that they look right, that, double checking document numbers, things like that. So if you do use a digital I-9 system, they should have, or I should say they can, contain field-specific logic to, help prevent those errors. If you do get audited, this is just some general tips, recommendations. Be polite, answer any questions, but just remember that you do not have to allow any agents access to the private areas of your campus, your office. If they do, say that you're being inspected, ask them for that notice of inspection, ask them for any other supporting documentation that they might have. You want to make sure that they are giving you paper copies of this documentation. You want to make sure that these documents are signed. Make sure that they're legitimate. Like I said, you're not required to allow them access to any private areas, except if they do have a warrant. So you'll just want to make sure you check that warrant, make sure it is specific. Really only allow them, within the parameters of what that warrant requests. We do recommend that you call the agency separately. So if an agent provides you with their business card, look up the official phone number for that agency and just give them a call. Ensure that this is a legitimate notice of inspection. Make sure that that's all in order for you. They should provide you with a certificate of service. So you and the agent would sign this. That ensures, that that's the paper trail that yes, this was provided. The employer acknowledges they've received this. If they don't provide this, there could be, it could snag some things up. So definitely ask for that certificate of service. And as I mentioned before, contact your legal department right away. You might have everything tip-top in shape, from the get-go, and that would be awesome. But you want your legal counsel, your legal department to be aware of this so they can just oversee everything, make sure that everything is being done, correctly and per your company standards. Like we said, if you do use mTrust, let us know as soon as possible. Same with any other third-party vendors. Let your vendor know as soon as possible. I think we didn't include this on the slide, but they will typically, they'll give you 3 days. They also give you the option to waive that 3 days if you think your documents are all ready. We recommend not waiving that. Just give yourself that time, give yourself the ability to go over everything, ensure that everything is 100% in order. Take your time and then, provide the information to the inspecting agents. So we've got another poll here. I want to see who all does a regular internal audit. of your I-9s. So, if this is something that maybe your company does quarterly, semi-annually, maybe every couple of years, someone goes through and sorts it, just so we can kind of gauge, how many people might need to maybe step up the audit process for their teams. So we've done about 30 seconds. I'll give another couple seconds. Looks like people might be done. So I will go ahead and end that poll. And we have a straight 50-50 split, yes and no. So everyone who said yes, great job. That's really, it's great, important. Everyone who said no, you definitely might want to consider talking with your HR team, getting some kind of an internal audit set up just to make sure that everything is in order ahead of time. So if you do run into a situation where you are being audited, you want to be confident that everything is in order the way it should be. You don't want to have to stress over what might be wrong. Okay. And that will conclude our presentation. So we have a couple more minutes. I just want to handle any questions that we might have. And I did want to point out a question that I received earlier from Regina. So on the name on the I-9, when I mentioned that it has to be on all of the pages of the I-9, great question. If they are blank, so if the employee has not used supplement A with the preparer translator or supplement B for the name change or the rehire, those blank pages do not need to be kept with the I-9. If the employee does later in their employment have a name change or they are rehired, they leave the company and they come back, then you can print, if you do use paper, you can print out a copy of that sheet and add it, but you do not have to keep blank copies of those supplements with the I-9 for it to be complete. So great question there. Let me take a look for any questions that we may not have answered. So Deborah asked, just to clarify, do we need to keep copies of supporting documents needed to, or used to complete the I-9? So if you are, the answer is sometimes yes, sometimes no. If you are participating in E-Verify and you are using that remote verification, you will need to have those documents on file. Or if they present you with an A document, a list A document, so passport, EAD card, then you will need to have that document on file. If you don't fall under those criteria, you don't necessarily have to have those supporting documents on file. Let's see here. And then we did have one more question from Tracy. What's the best way to handle I-9 retention in the EmpTrust system? Should the I-9s be archived, or would or should we actually purge them? Phil, do you want to take that one?
Yeah, so with with the retention period, for an electronic system such as EmpTrust, the system will, if it's past the retention criteria, it will, depending on how it's configured, it can be purged automatically, or you can have a process where you review it and purge it. Now, some systems will allow you to archive those records. It can depend on potentially the system that you're using and what that process would look like. Every system can handle it differently. With the EmpTrust platform, our system is set up to track that retention criteria. And so, it does follow that. And as those records are updated with, termination information, you'll see that there are some records available for purging. And again, it could be a fully automated process or, allow you to review it depending on how you prefer to have it set up.
Thank you, Phil. And then there's one more, we're almost at time, but would you recommend scanning all I-9s to have digital files rather than physical paperwork? I'm assuming this is the employees are filling it out on paper and then scanning just to have the digital files. I would definitely say it depends on what's going to work best for your company. If you do have the storage and you want to keep the paper files on hand, you know, definitely something you do. If your company would prefer to have a digital file, that's something, you know, to consider. But I would want to check with whatever your legal team is more comfortable with. So really whatever they would recommend. But ultimately it boils down to how your company wants to handle them, what's going to be easiest for your team. And we are at time. So thank you everyone so much for joining us today. You know, we appreciate everyone that joined. There are a couple questions we didn't get to. I'm going to reach out after the webinar. And again, the slides are available within the GoTo UI under the materials. We've also got some other brochures available there on our I-9, E-Verify, and our EVA services. So thank you again, everyone, and I hope you have a great day.